Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I want to talk about what I consider to be one of the most underappreciated product that Wizards of the Coast has ever put out, and that is the game Dungeon Command. Dungeon Command is sort of a spiritual successor to the plastic line of the D&D miniatures game that ran from 2003 around the release of 3.5 until I think around 2010, or 2009. Or 2010, I think is when they kind of discontinued that. They were still selling miniatures, but they were only for use with the role-playing game. However, starting in 2012, Wizards of the Coast did release this line of that they call Dungeon Command. Now, some of you may not have heard of it, or some of you may have completely dismissed it because they did try to promote it as their new miniatures game, but there's reasons why saying that it's sort of like the new minis game might not work so well. So what Dungeon Command is it's a skirmish level game where it comes with pre-painted miniatures, but instead of using typical dice that you would use in most other games like D&D Minis used and some of these other ones, it kind of got rid of the dice altogether. In exchange, they decided to use a card-based system where you'd have what's called order cards that you could use to increase your attacks or decrease the damage that you take. And we'll kind of go over some of those things here in a little bit. But what I want to do with this video is just kind of go over the basics, how to set up the game, how to read the cards, how to play the game. And what I want to do later on is do a series of videos, 5 videos, where I unbox each of the individual sets that come out. This is the full line. No other sets were released, and I believe these are in the proper chronological order. So there's Heart of Cormyr, Sting of Lolth. Those two actually were released at the same time. Tyranny of Goblins, Curse of Undeath, and Blood of Grummish. So what I'll do now is just kind of go over how to set things up and how to read the cards and some of the rules to keep in mind when you're playing the game. Alright, so here we have just the typical box. Now again, this isn't going to be a full unboxing video, but it's just a nice cardboard box. It does have a little thing here that actually helps keep it sealed, which works great. So it actually usually holds up pretty well. Now unfortunately this particular one, I don't know what's going to show, but it did get a little bit of water damage, which kind of sucked. But anyway, we'll just open this up. So each faction set does come with its own rulebook. Now, I shouldn't say its own rulebook. Each of the faction sets comes with the rulebook, and it's the same rulebook no matter which one you get. Now the covers are all different, but the actual contents are all the exact same. I'm just going to kind of flip through it quickly here. It is a really nice rulebook actually, and you know the artwork and stuff that they do have when they have it is nice. Gets the job done. Uses again obviously lots of pictures of the game itself. Play. Whoops. Sorry, didn't mean to hit you there. Anyway, this is sort of just an idea of what the rulebook looks like. On the back, it has your quick reference, which goes over setup. Goes over your sequence of play and how to win the game. So, for example, just to show again that you know everything is the exact same. So we've got the rulebook here. This is the rulebook came with Sting of Lolth. So let's just go to the sort of the example page here. So this is the Heart of Cormyr one. This is page 7. And if I go to the Sting of Lolth, here is its page 7. So they all use the exact same cards, the exact same things for all of their all of the rule books. So all the factions have the exact same rule book. The only thing that's different is the cover. And I think, you know, at least I think some of even the later ones even have the same color on the back, whereas this one here actually has like the different colors, but that's pretty much it. Those are the only real differences, is the front and back cover, but all the information contained inside is the exact same. We also have our terrain tiles. So there's 2 of the shorter ends. These are sort of like your end pieces. Commander cards, which I'll go over in a moment here. And then you got 2 of the larger ones. As well, you've got your miniatures. So there's 12 miniatures in each set. I'm just going to pull out just a couple of them here, just to kind of show how you do the setup in a little bit. Inside there's also some damage counters. So there's ones for either 10 points of damage or 50 to help keep track of the amount of damage on your individual creatures. And it also comes with a set of cards. Each of the models or miniatures has a corresponding a creature card, which has its own deck, and then you've got your order cards, which are things that can augment your attacks, things like that. And there is another set of cards that's included as well, which I'll kind of go into at the end of the video, because it doesn't actually have anything to do with the Dungeon Command game itself. So let's just get those out of there. Just grab a few other things out of here, and then we should be good to go. Alright, so let's just get this out of the way here. Like I said, this isn't going to be a full-on unboxing, but I just kind of want to get the board set up. So I've got over here, I already have the second faction box kind of already set up, just the map and how it looks. But looking at these tiles here, what's interesting is that these are actually double-sided. So you've got your dungeon setting, which is the one that I typically use, but if you flip them over, they also have a wilderness setting. And you basically just make your choice if you want to play wilderness or in the dungeon. And of course you can see that they do interlock with each other quite well. The difference between the dungeon and the wilderness is purely aesthetic. So it's just the way that things look. It doesn't actually change any of the abilities or any of the rules in the game itself. It just looks, maybe every once in a while, it's nice to use sort of the wilderness one instead of always using the dungeon. But what you do at the beginning of the game, you take your 4 tiles, and you go and you set them up in anywhere that you want. Now you set up your own tiles so that they actually create your half of the dungeon, and there are rules for that. So for example, the 2 large tiles, you'll see they have one end that has like the hooks for it to connect to the other ones, and it also has one edge that just is flat. These flat edges have to be facing out so that it creates a sealed in dungeon, meaning that you can't have, for example, a situation like that. Just you can't do that the way that this game is set up. So so you just basically take that, and as far as features on these tiles are concerned, you'll see some of these areas here with the triangle. These are considered difficult terrain, so it costs an extra point of movement to get through each of these individual squares. These here, with the treasure chest, the coins, and the little circle, these are treasure markers, and they affect things like morale and can help you basically stay in the game longer. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on how morale works, but basically what you have, each faction comes with 6 of these squares that just has a treasure chest on them, and on the underside they have numbers, so they are numbered 1, 2, and 3. You've placed these face down, so we'll do that in a moment here, but let's get the tiles actually set up. Some of them have magic circles. Magic circles don't have their own unique abilities, but some of the units that you may have in the miniatures game, or in the game I should say, make use of magic circles, so just keep that in mind. But let's just interlock these here. So the sets of large tiles connect with one another. And again, you have to do it so that the flat edges, so that the flat edges are facing out. And then you've got your end pieces here, and they just kind of complete the dungeon. One of these will be labeled as a start area, and you'll see a dotted line that kind of goes around. So the space inside of these dotted lines, so the space right around here, or inside of this, sorry about that, inside of here are the squares that you can actually deploy your models into. So we're just going to go through and set that there. I have the other start tile over here, and then we're just going to set this one down like so. I do want to draw attention to this one here. Actually, this is the drow one, but another one of the things that you can see are these spikes. So little triangles, but they have spikes on them instead of just being like the isosceles triangle type of thing. These represent hazardous terrain. As you can see, there's like a large brazier with fire coming, burning in it. So if you move into any of these squares, you take 10 damage. So that's just something to keep in mind. You usually don't want to move your guys through it, but there are some things that can actually manipulate your opponent's figures. So if you want, you can throw them in fire type of thing. So that's what those look like. And some of the future sets also have doors. Doors are basically difficult terrain, so it costs an extra square of movement to go through. And but if you're on the if you're on the opposite side of the door from your enemy, it blocks line of sight. None of these ones have it, but that's just something to note for the future as well. So we'll just take these treasure things here, and you just kind of mix them up. You don't look at what's printed underneath, and you just select 3 at random, and anywhere where you see on your side of the dungeon one of these circles, you just set them on there like so. And then whatever ones are left, you just put off to the side. Don't look at them. You don't want to spoil the numbers that are in there. Now, let's look at our commanders. One thing to note about Dungeon Command is that your commanders aren't actually actively involved in the battle. They're not on the field. You're basically, just sending things into, creatures into your dungeon to explore, to attack the enemy, and things along those lines. So these actual guys here are not included as miniatures, and it took me a while to figure that out. I kept thinking that something was missing, or I didn't have something properly because I didn't have the miniatures that match these pictures. But so your commander is off the field. Each faction comes with 2 commanders for reasons I'll get into near the end of the video. But what these all have is a little bit of flavor text, obviously their picture, and there's 2 sets of numbers here. You've got your morale, and you've got your leadership. So, your leadership, I'll just read this here first. You also see that they both have starting numbers. So, for example, Rinsera the Alarfon, has a starting morale of 12 and a starting leadership of 7. Whereas Valner Trueblade has a starting morale of 14 and a leadership of 7. So, the leadership of 14 sounds like it may be better, but they also each have their own unique special abilities. So, for example, with Rinsera, she has Spellbook. So once during your turn, you can discard 1 order card from your hand, which are these ones here, and you can draw 1 order card to basically replace it. So if you have one that's kind of useless, you can actually discard it to draw one that will hopefully be useful to you. You've also got your creature hands and your order starting hand. So she starts with 6 order cards at the beginning of the game, whereas Valner only starts with 4. Each of them have 3 creature cards. So what that basically means is you would shuffle these up, both of these decks separately, and at the start of the game you would draw off the top 3 creatures to have your starting creature, to have your creature hand, and then you would also start, let's just say I'm going to use Valner. So 1, 2, 3, so he'd have 4, whoops. Yeah, so he has 4 order cards that he starts the game with, as well as 3 creatures. In addition, he has an ability called Versatile. Each adventurer you control can use a standard action move up to its speed, so you can kind of move your guys faster if you use this guy. So they do trade off reasons to kind of have them out here. Now, some of the other pieces that are in the game as well, included in the box, are these little diamonds here with the centers punched out. And what these are for are to track your morale and your leadership. So you kind of put them so you can see the number through, and as they increase and decrease, you just kind of slide them. So that's kind of cool. But now we got to set up, we got to get our creatures out. Now, I only got 3 miniatures that I already pulled out, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and just find those particular ones, just so I don't have to go back into the box. So, I have my opening creature cards. So these are the creature cards. We'll go over them here, just so you kind of see what they all do. So this is the Half-Orc Thug. So it is, up here it's got its name, but underneath it has its subtypes. Subtypes are important. Some of your unit's abilities depend on your subtypes. Some of the order cards may be used by certain subtypes as well. So that's kind of important to know. You've also got your hit points, so this has 50 hit points. You've got your set symbol down here, so that's just the Heart of Cormyr symbol. Speed of 6, so it can move 6 squares when you activate it. And it shows a picture of the miniature down here as well. Up at the top we have its level, so this is a level 3 creature. And it has stats as well. So this has strength and dexterity, and I'll get into that in a moment as to what those do. And now you also have your attacks. So again, we don't use dice, but what we have is a ranged attack, so symbolized by a bow. The number immediately next to it is the amount of damage that it does. And the in brackets for your ranged attacks, that number there, so the 5, is the number of squares away your target can be for you to get the attack off. So this can make a ranged attack to anything within 5 squares and deal 20 damage. You also have a little sword symbol, which is a melee attack. So melee ones you have to actually be adjacent to your enemy. And they have, again, the damage there as well. Now, some cards have a special ability. So the Half-Orc Thug has Explosive Bolts. So whenever this creature makes a ranged attack, it deals 10 damage to each adjacent creature to the target. So this is adjacent creature, not adjacent enemy creature. So you got to keep that in mind when you're using this thing's ranged attacks, for example. And then we just have, as another example here, we've got one, just the Dragon Knight. So he's level 5. He's a good humanoid human adventurer. He's got 120 hit points, speed of 5. The set symbol there, now that's a different color, and that actually is significant, but I'll explain that later on. And it just has a melee attack for 40 and can use and has strength and constitution. So what do the levels mean? How do you use them? How do you get these guys out on the field? So to start the game with, I have 7 leadership. So the leadership number basically represents the maximum number of combined levels of creatures you can have on the field at any given time. So starting with 7, I can, if I wanted to, deploy at the very beginning of the game the Dragon Knight and the Human Ranger. So if I do that, let's just say I set these 2 guys out. That adds up to 7, and I just put their miniatures in the starting area. Now, if let's just say you don't want to necessarily do that, for example, let's just say that you had an opening hand of, so let's just say this was your opening hand instead. You've got Copper Dragon, War Wizard, and yeah, let's just say you got the War Wizard, Dragon Knight, and the Copper Dragon. You start with 7 for your leadership, but you really want to be able to get that dragon out. You could start with the dragon if you want. So let's just say you do that. You start with the dragon, put the dragon out in your starting area, then you have to wait subsequent turns to get other things out. So each round, your leadership number will increase, and we'll go over the timing for that a bit later. So by the end of by the time you're done your turn, your leadership will have increased by 1 each and every turn that you activate. So those are the creatures, and that's just going over sort of deploying them. Once you're done deploying creatures, you always draw back up to your creature hand. So in this case, you got a creature hand of 3. I've got 2 cards that are currently out. Whoop. So I've only got 1 card left in my creature hand, but you always draw up to your maximum number once you're done deploying. So you go back up, you would draw 2 more. In this case, I draw a Dwarf Cleric and an Earth Guardian. And then I can hold on to those, and as my leadership increases or as I lose units, I can actually go through and replenish them, replenish the ranks with the new guys that I draw. When your models are defeated, whatever their level is, you subtract that from your morale number. So the morale here starts at 14. Let's just say my Dragon Knight ended up dying. It would go down from 14 to 9. When your morale reaches 0, you lose the game. If you also start your turn and you don't have any units on the field, you lose the game that way as well. So you always want to make sure that you have somebody on there. But that's basically how you lose. To increase your morale, what you do is you basically move your units onto these treasure tokens. So let's just move my ranger over here so she stops on this treasure. So I flip it over and it has the number 2 on it. So what that means is you grab 2 treasure tokens that look like this. So they have the same image on both sides, just treasure chest, coins and some fancy stuff there. And whatever the number was, on your token here, you put that many number of treasure things down. Now the way that the base game plays is you have to spend an action to pick up a treasure. So what you would do is you would say, you know, I move and I'll use her action to pick up one of these. You do that, and as a result, your morale goes from 14 to 15. So the first little bit of the game is usually spent with people trying to run around the board, get their miniatures over the board, and pick up the treasure. To streamline this process, the way that I usually do it is you pick up all the treasure for one activation, just so that it speeds things up. The downside to that is that you may end up drawing fewer order cards, but I just think that it works better for you know, the speed of play. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's how you can increase your morale, and of course it decreases as your guys get damaged and they get removed from the game. Now, instead of just having your kind of standard or boring regular normal attacks, like just, you know, for example, her ranged attack that does 10, or, you know, like the Dragon Knights that does 40, you can also, during your turns, go through and use the order cards that you draw, or that you have a hand of. Now, you don't refresh these. You don't have a maximum hand size, so you can have a whole bunch of these in your hand at any given time. If you use them all, you don't refresh them, so you know, you would just end up drawing the one that you get at the start of each of your turns. So as far as activations go in the sequence of play, which we have here, so you've got your refresh, which is where you draw your order card, so then you activate your creatures one at a time in any order that you choose, and you have them basically, they can move their speed and do an action. So those actions can include any of these order cards. Now the thing about the order cards is, we'll go over the individual ones here, or just go over sort of the cards themselves. So what they have is they'll each have a name, so this one's Killing Strike. It's a standard action, level 5 strength, and then what it does. So there's three different types of cards. There's standard actions, minor actions, and immediate actions. So standard actions and minor actions are done during your activation. And what they do is they have increased effects. So for example, Killing Blow, you make a melee attack that deals 100 damage. However, in order to use these cards, you have to have not only the correct ability, like strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, or charisma, but you also have to have the right level. So in this case, to use Killing Strike, I would have to have a level 5 creature that has strength. Now, where that doesn't necessarily always happen, you may not always have those individuals on the field. Let's just say you had a situation where you've got these 3 people out, and you want to use the Killing Strike because it can take out a large enemy and potentially win you the game, but you don't have any of your big guys left. If all of these individuals are adjacent to one another, you can actually use all 3 of them. You choose which one's actually activating, but you would tap them all. So when you activate and use a standard action, being, you know, one of the cards, or making a normal attack, or picking up a pile of treasure, you tap the card and turn it sideways. But let's just say you want to use Killing Blow, and you've got these 3 together. You can actually tap all 3 of them at the same time, and you would add their levels together. They all have to have the right ability as well, so they'd all have to have strength. In this case, they all do. So they now have a total combined amount of levels of 6, so you can make this melee attack as a level 5 card. I've never actually used this ability, but it is there. It does take away from your opportunity to use activations or attacks with the other guys as well, but that's definitely an option. Now, once you've gone through and activated all of your guys, you then have basically your deploy phase. So that's when your leadership increases by 1. So let's just say we put it up to 8. And if you have some available space, so let's just say you only had these 2 guys out, so you had, you know, 4 levels worth of people out, but you had 8 leadership. And let's just say you had a level 4 creature, you can do that, or if you had some level 2s. You don't always have to have your maximum number of leadership out on the field. Sometimes you want to leave some room to get something large out later on, like the dragon, for example. If you want to get that out, you can hold off until you have 6 leadership available. And then you go to basically your end of turn, which is the cleanup phase. So what you actually do, and this may seem a bit counterintuitive, but let's just say you had these 2 guys tapped, you did your attacks. Once you're done, you untap them. And the reason that you untap them is for things that are referred to as immediate actions. So these are immediate order cards. These are done in response to things. These are done on your opponent's turn, and they're almost always defensive in nature. So where you had your killing strike that does extra damage or does a massive amount of damage, you may have something like shield that you can play on when you're attacked. And for example, this one here, it's immediate, level 2, requires intelligence. But you can choose this creature or a creature within 5 squares, prevent 30 damage. And what you do is you basically tap them to use the card. Now this one can't use it because it's not doesn't have intelligence, but just as an example, when you're being defensive, you tap the creature that's activating and using this immediate card. So that way you can really only do it with 1 card per unit, and again they have to have the matching thing. The last type of order card that I want to go over are the minor actions. So I mentioned that they're done on your activation, but what these do, they don't tap your card, and there's no limit to the number of minor actions you can take with any given unit on your turn. So these are usually things that allow you to move around. Some of them may allow you to do like a ranged attack. I think there's one that does that, so you get a free attack in. But they also have, so you got shove aside, which slide 1 adjacent creature 3 squares. It's level 1, requires strength. Now there are some, I'm going to focus here, like saving throw for example, that, whoops, didn't mean to bump that again, that uses any. So any ability score, you don't have to have any specific one to use that. So that's the way that goes. So you basically play through the game, you draw your cards, you play your orders, you try to attack, and destroy as many of your opponent's units as you can. And if you manage to wipe them all out, you win the game. And that's basically it. That's it as far as the basic rules go. There are some more advanced things that you can do. For example, there's things like how to use cover, or how to cower to essentially prevent damage, but you still lose morale. If you want to know about those in more detail, then I can mention that sort of in a future video. But again, I just kind of wanted to go over the basics of the game, just how to set it up, how to play it, and kind of give like my final thoughts on it, which we'll do right now. So that's my look at Dungeon Command, so just sort of the basic overview of how to set things up and the phases and how to play the game. Again, if there's any more specific questions that you want to ask about it, you can certainly feel free to do that. I answer those in the comments below. I may also include answers to them in future videos. Like I said, I'm not going to go through and show everything thoroughly as far as like the minis and stuff like that in this video, because I want to do actual unboxings where I can go over and discuss the individual factions themselves. As far as final thoughts on this product, like I said, to me this is one of the most underappreciated and underrated products that Wizards of the Coast had put out. This came out in 2012 starting off, so this was during a period of time in which a lot of people really weren't happy with Wizards of the Coast, and it's a shame because I think that caused people to overlook this. I understand that yes, it is a diceless system, and that may make things feel kind of cheap when it comes to your miniatures games, but I actually really like it. I'm the kind of person that typically rolls pretty bad, so I like the fact that this game is about strategy. And if anything, you could say about the 4th edition era from 2008 until around 2012, was the fact that it was a very tactical time for the Dungeons & Dragons game. So instead of relying on the luck of the dice, for example, you have to really look at how you conserve your order cards and how you actually maneuver your creatures around the board. Those things really do matter, and it takes out that randomness. so that, again, it comes down to who strategizes better, which strategy is not necessarily my forte, so I tend to lose more of these games than I win, but that's okay. It's still nice to know that strategy plays a very important part in the game, and that's what's going to, at the end of the day, help you win or cause you to lose. So I really enjoy that. The other thing that I actually like about this is that even though, for example, these two sets came out at the same time, this was also 2012 and 2010 were a point in time which Wizards of the Coast was starting to understand that not everybody's going to buy everything. So going back to earlier when I had talked about the set symbols, so this is the Drow one, for example, I had mentioned that there were two different colors and that they were significant. The reason for that is this game actually accommodates people who only have the funds to pick up a single one of these sets, but you can still play a two-player game. Basically what you do is you just count the edge that has the hooks that would latch onto the second player's dungeon tiles. You would just consider that to be a wall, and what you do is you split your order cards and your creature cards by the color. So you would have all your gold cards together, so you'd have, you know, half, so you'd have 6 miniatures, and you have your order cards, gold and silver. Now those trackers that I showed earlier that you use for your leadership and your morale, they come in silver and gold in the box. So each box has 2 sets of trackers. That's also why each set has 2 commanders. So it really makes it so that if you can't afford or you can't find all of these and you still want to be able to at least play it once to try it out for yourself, you can do that with a friend with just a single box. This game also does accommodate 3 and 4 player matchups as well. And it does, in the back of the book, has the configurations that you would use for the 3 and 4 player games, which is pretty cool. It's something that I really like. Overall, this is one of my favorite products that Wizards of the Coast has put out, and I really wish that they would go back and revisit this concept. To me, this was a fun playing game. I've always enjoyed it. I've never played a match of this that I haven't enjoyed. The friends that I've had over to play this with me also, you know, seem to have thoroughly enjoyed this product. So with Wizards of the Coast bringing things back like their cooperative board games, it'd be nice for them to actually again re-release some of these Dungeon Command scenario or faction packs. You could even have them line up with the current storyline that's going on, so you could have like or instead of the current one, you could have it for one of the earlier ones, so that way your current line of miniatures that WizKids are doing, they can still put those out and not have them be interfered by these things in particular. But I'd love to see this again. I'd love to see, you know, factions. I'd like to see a set of miniatures that you can get that are all built around a theme. The other really last cool thing that I want to say about this product is it's actually can be used with the D&D cooperative board games like Castle Ravenloft, Wrath of Ashardalon, Legend of Drizzt, and Temple of Elemental Evil, because in addition to the order cards and the creature cards, it actually comes with a set of monster cards that you can use with those board games. So this is the monster cards from the exact same style, front and back, that you would get from Castle Ravenloft, Wrath of Ashardalon, Legend of Drizzt, and Temple of Elemental Evil. So, for example, the Drow one, Sting of Lolth, goes really well with the Legend of Drizzt game. There's an undead faction for Dungeon Command that fits in, I'd say, pretty well with Castle Ravenloft. The Tyranny of Goblins or the Blood of Grummish, so like the Goblin one or the Orc one, those would actually go pretty decently with Wrath of Ashardalon. So it's just a really great concept, and it was awesome that they had the idea in mind to actually make this something that you could use with other products that they put out as well, but still have the option to let a single box stand on its own. So if you haven't had a chance to play Dungeon Command, if you get the opportunity to, I recommend it. If you can find these, I mean, they're not, you know, in print anymore, they're hard to find, but I have seen a few of these out in the wild. If you get a chance to pick them up, I recommend it. Even if it's just for the miniatures itself, it's a great way to get, you know, a collection of miniatures for, you know, heroes, drow, underdark creatures, goblins, undead, and orcs. So like I said, I love the game. I'd love to see more of it come out, even if they did just smaller expansion packs that had like 3 miniatures, for example, with their stat cards, a few extra order cards, and maybe like an extra terrain tile, like an extra one of the large tiles, something like that, just to get more use out of these, because again, fantastic product, absolutely love it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little bit about this, and if you were on the fence about it before, but you know somebody that has some of these, if you get a chance, like I said, I hope you check it out, because I think it is definitely worth your time. Anyway, that's it for this video, but next week I am planning to do a series of unboxing videos for each of the 5 factions. So that'll be going through showing off the miniature cards, the miniatures, the cards, and just kind of discuss how the faction plays and what they excel at and what they're kind of weaker at. So again, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.